The door wouldn't open. Ruth pulled at the handle, her hands shaking, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The room was dark, except for the dim glow from the streetlights outside. She could hear him breathing behind her. Slow. Come. You know you can't leave until I say so. Pastor Joshua's voice was deep and steady. Pastor, please, my husband is waiting for me. I shouldn't be here. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He stepped closer. Ruth, my daughter, don't let the devil confuse you. Remember what we talked about. Your husband does not appreciate you. The Lord has chosen me to lift your burdens. Tears welled in Ruth's eyes. She had come here for prayers, for advice. She never thought it would come to this. Then, suddenly, someone knocked on the front door. Ruth gasped. Pastor Joshua froze. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then the knock came again, louder this time. Who is that? The pastor barked, his voice sharp. A deep voice answered from outside. Pastor, it's Brother Emmanuel. I need to see you. Ruth exhaled shakily. Brother Emmanuel was her husband's friend. If he saw her here. Pastor Joshua glared at Ruth and whispered, not a word. Then, as if flipping a switch, his face brightened into a holy, welcoming expression. He walked to the door and opened it. Brother Emmanuel, he said, spreading his arms. The Lord be praised. Come in. Ruth stood frozen as Emmanuel stepped inside. His sharp eyes scanned the room. Then they landed on her. His forehead creased. Sister Ruth. What are you doing here this late? Pastor Joshua chuckled. Oh, my dear daughter came for deliverance. You know, marriage can be hard. I was just giving her some spiritual guidance. Emmanuel's eyes flicked to Ruth. Is everything okay? Ruth's lips parted. She could say it. Right now. She could tell him. But the pastor's fingers dug into her back, a silent warning. She forced a smile. Yes, everything is fine. But in her heart, she knew this was just the beginning of a nightmare. Ruth walked home that night, her legs weak, her thoughts tangled. She couldn't believe what had almost happened. How did she even get here? She had been a faithful wife. She loved her husband, Chike. But after 3 years of marriage, things had changed. Chike barely noticed her anymore. He worked late, came home tired, and hardly had time for her. The little things, his smile, his playful teasing, the way he used to hold her at night, had all disappeared. Then Pastor Joshua came into the picture. He had noticed her pain. After church service one Sunday, he called her aside. Sister Ruth, the Lord placed you in my heart. Tell me, are you happy? That question alone had made her chest tighten. She had tried to brush it off, but the pastor had insisted. He had convinced her to open up about her struggles. And before she knew it, she was pouring out her heart to him, telling him things she hadn't even told Chike. It is well, my daughter, Pastor Joshua had said, holding her hands. A woman needs to be nurtured, loved, and cared for. If your husband does not do his duty, the Lord will raise another to comfort you. That night, she had gone home with his words ringing in her ears. At first, she told herself he was just being a caring pastor. But slowly, he became more than that. He started calling her at odd hours, checking on her, telling her she was special, chosen. He sent scriptures that twisted her thoughts, made her believe she was not wrong for feeling neglected. Then, one day, he invited her to his house for a special prayer. She should have known better. Now, as she approached her home, her mind raced. She couldn't tell Chike. He would never understand. But she also knew she could never go back to the pastor's house again. As she entered their small apartment, she saw Chike sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. He barely looked up. You're back, he said flatly. Ruth swallowed. Yes. She waited, hoping he would ask where she had been. He didn't. Anger bubbled inside her. If he had just paid attention to her, maybe she wouldn't have been so weak. Maybe she wouldn't have fallen into Pastor Joshua's trap. But then, she shook her head. No. She couldn't blame Chuck for this. This was her own battle to fight. She had to stay away from Pastor Joshua. But she had no idea. The pastor wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, Ruth tried to pretend everything was normal. She cooked, cleaned, and even hummed to herself, trying to push away the thought of what had happened the night before. She told herself it was over. She would avoid Pastor Joshua, focus on her marriage, and move on. But by afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Pastor Joshua. My daughter, I am praying for you. The enemy is trying to confuse you. We need to talk. Ruth's heart skipped. She hesitated, staring at the message. She should ignore it. She knew she should. Another message came in. Come to the church office after service tomorrow. There's something I must share with you. The Lord has revealed something about your destiny. Destiny. That word made her pause. What if this was really spiritual? What if God was speaking through him? Before she could think, her fingers moved. Okay, Pastor. The next evening, after service, Ruth waited until most people had left before sneaking to the church office. Her palms were sweaty, her heart restless. Pastor Joshua was sitting behind his large desk when she entered. He looked up, smiling. Oh, Sister Ruth. I knew you would come. She swallowed. Pastor, He raised a hand. Say no more. Then he stood and walked towards her, his eyes locking onto hers. I see the conflict in your heart. The Lord showed me a vision. You are struggling, my daughter, but you must not fight his will. Ruth frowned. His will. Pastor Joshua nodded. Yes. You and we are spiritually connected. Your marriage was built on shaky ground, but the Lord has given you another path. Ruth's breath hitched. Pastor, I don't understand. He took her hands gently. You belong to me, Ruth. The Lord has chosen you for a higher calling. A chill ran through her. She pulled her hands away. But I love my husband. Pastor Joshua chuckled. Love. My daughter, open your eyes. Has Chuck treated you like a queen? Has he nourished your soul? A woman like you needs a man of God to lead her. Ruth shook her head. No, Pastor. This is wrong. His smile faded. His jaw tightened. You dare question the Lord's will? His voice was low but firm. Ruth felt a wave of fear wash over her. She had never seen this side of him before. Pastor, I should go, she turned to leave, but his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. You are not leaving yet. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can bring you more amazing stories.